You've found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we look at the reality of modern data centers. Human error has become the number 2 reason that we do restores today. Number 1, of course, would be cyber attacks. Back in the day, 100 years ago when I first started, it was really all about hardware failures. Hard drives crashing, servers dying, but now it's people making mistakes. Sometimes it's a user accidentally deleting a file, or maybe it's an admin wiping out an entire directory structure. Humans are the weakest link. I've got, 4 or 5 war stories that'll make you cringe, and we talk about insider threats as well, and why your backup systems need to be designed with human error and human frailty in mind. Trust me, these stories will remind you why we do what we do. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery ever since I had to explain to my boss why there were no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to ever again happen to me. I don't want it to happen to you. That's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and with me, I once again have my security deposit consultant, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis. Although I thought you would have said you're a person who was successful at DIYing something for probably the first time in their life.
a guy that finally joined the ranks because you're completed now with your.
I am. If people listen to the last episode, I had to redo some plumbing stuff for our sprinkler system, and it was a little painful. I'm not going to lie. And especially because I had to replace a shutoff valve, which meant I had to shut off the water for the entire house while I was replacing that shutoff valve. And then it turned out that I was leaking and blah, 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 blah. So eventually got around to it. Turned out, make sure you wrap the Teflon tape in the right direction.
Yes. You figured that out, didn't you?
Yes. And also having the right tools helps, especially a pipe wrench.
Yes. More than one.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So once I did that, then actually doing all the PVC gluing and all
that
the rest.
That part was easy, right?
Yeah. So I remembered purple stuff first, then the blue stuff.
Yeah.
Or clear stuff, I should say.
Yeah. Oh, you use clear stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that explains why I saw the blue. I saw the purple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it worked and it held, and it's, knock on wood, so far so good. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you can now sprinkle your yard once again. I, of course, don't have that challenge because I have a fake yard.
Yeah. Well, it's not a yard. It's just for the plants and all the drip irrigation. So.
Oh, gotcha.
And
what's a yard? It's not grass.
It's not grass, yeah. And especially over the weekend, I think the temperature hit 87 here in the Bay Area, and today it's 61. So, yeah.
Yeah, we had a heat wave here as well. It actually got up to like 90 at one point.
Dang. Yeah, today it was cold and rainy. So.
Yeah, I think May Gray's back. No, sun's shining outside. I don't know. Who knows? You never know in San Diego, right? Especially in May, right? May Gray and June gloom. For those that don't live here, it's pretty much overcast all the time for 2 months of the year.
Yeah.
But it's why the temperature is
even kelter.
Yeah.
Dude,
people come here. What?
Go ahead, finish.
Well, I just said people come here and they're like, why is it so? Where's it on? I'm like, this is like, do you do no research on the places you go to?
Right? Yeah. Well, it's like the time I think the twice that I've been up to Seattle, and both times it was nice and sunny. And so in my mind, it's imprinted that Seattle is always nice and sunny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I spent 4 months in Seattle in 1998, and it was the most perfect 4 months in the history of Seattle. It rained like 2 days during those 4 months, and it was just, and yeah, I could have moved there, but it's not normally like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but well, today, speaking of humans making mistakes, today I thought we'd talk a little bit about human error. And as I often, find myself doing, I'll talk about back in the day. Back in the day, the reason when I started my IT career, the number one reason we were doing restores was actual hardware failure, right? Because I'm pre-RAID,
Yeah.
right? We had mission critical servers running on individual hard drives,
Which is bonkers.
right? Right?
Actually, do you think what is it? Like this, isn't there like a satellite that's been out there for like 40 years?
Oh yeah, yeah,
And do you think that still also runs on a single disk?
yeah, definitely, absolutely, yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. Well, it might. Do they have disk drives? I don't know.
No.
I mean, if it's been there that long. But yeah, it's. I mean, I'm pretty sure RAID was invented before I actually saw it in the data center. But in my data center, which was a big, $35 billion company, we didn't have any, right? And
Was it the
and go ahead.
was it the difference though between RAID on open systems versus RAID on mainframes?
Yeah, I don't know. It certainly wasn't. I remember the first time, and I talked about it a few episodes. The first time I saw hot swappable disk drives, right, where you had the RAID arrays, right, and all of that sort of all went down right around that time frame. But for a few years, we were losing entire databases or servers because an individual hard drive went down, and so we were restoring that stuff all the time. And in fact, my first, once I left the bank and I went into consulting, one of the reasons I got so good at bare metal recovery was that I was doing it all the time, because I was at the headquarters of a large oil and gas company, and they had all these servers that had not been maintained in a really long time, and so we were doing crazy things like installing patches and rebooting them. And a significant portion of the time, they just didn't come back up. So,
Practice makes perfect, though, right, Curtis?
yeah, and so and so my point is that back then, a significant portion of the time, the reason you were doing a restore, it was because the actual hardware failed, and that is just pretty much gone. Between the fact that we now use solid state as hard drives and the fact that we use that no one does anything important on an individual. I mean, your laptop, your phone, these are individual drives, but nothing in a server, right? And
also probably just reliability of components has also gone up.
Absolutely. The result of all of that is that at this point, there are, generally speaking, only two reasons we restore things, and both of them have to do with people, right? Either people purposefully did something to damage the systems, or they accidentally did something to damage the systems. Are you with me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not a hardware failure.
It's not a hardware failure, right? So either bad people, bad actors, it's a ransomware attack, it's a cyber attack of some sort, or stupid users.
Would you consider like the OVH fire?
Or stupid admins. So that is still a human error, in my opinion. I mean, okay. So we can add that as a third category, which is natural disasters, right? So if a fire happens, we'll put a fire in a natural disaster. Although that fire, I'm not sure it was a natural disaster. But yeah, so that is a third reason. I'll take that. But even that, the reason they end up having to do a restore, I think, was human error.
Yeah.
Right. Meaning that they just configured everything all wrong.
Yeah.
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So let's talk about the accidental. Humans accidentally did something.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about the bad actors.
Yeah.
So let's talk about and basically what this kind of boils down to is either stupid users or stupid admins, right?
Yes. So there are two stories I want you to tell.
Okay.
Right. The first one is restoring a document. The document called resume.
Yeah.
Right. And then this second one I want you to talk about is the file server with the user home directories.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
And the script.
Yeah. Sorry, Gondo. We're going to call you stupid admin. Yeah. So that was, back in the day when I got, we had 12,000 employees and we had a help desk, and you could call in. This was, pre-web, everything. You lost a file, you called into the help desk, and the help desk would maybe try to help you find the file. But if not, they would issue a restore request. We got a lot of restore requests, very regular. Another reason why I got good at doing this, because unlike a lot of places, we didn't do backups just to do them. We did restores on a very regular basis, right? And there was this person who called, and they asked to have a file restored, and it was called resume.doc. And we were like, really? Like, that's the what happened to resume.doc? Well, I was updating it. Were you? Is that right? Yes, I was updating my resume.doc, and I fat fingered it basically. Yeah.
And what were you trying to resume?
Yeah, what were you resuming?
Career?
Yeah, trying to resume your career. That might have been, depending on who we told, that might have been a resume producing event. Yeah. So that one was kind of funny, but I think that the story that really drives home because admins are not perfect, right? And you do things. You do things to make things better, but sometimes you do the wrong thing, right? I mean, I think of like the KPMG. The KPMG, yep. I think is like that's like the best one that I had nothing to do with, where they're just trying to delete one guy's chats, and they were being stopped by Microsoft retention policies, and so they made a new retention policy that had no retention, and then they thought they moved the one guy into it, but instead they moved the entire company into it, and they deleted. It was like 150,000 people's chats, like that, and there was no backup, right? Yep. But yeah, this other story is a good one, and Gonda, we love you. So we had a file server. I remember it's HP FSO1, HP file server, 1. And we had a lot of employees, and we had a lot of turnover. And over time, and this is old school Unix. You had Home 1, Curtis, right? Mm-hmm. And after the person left the company, we did not have an offboarding process. Mm-hmm. Would be or if we had one, it didn't include deleting the old data. And so somebody said, we think we have a lot of directories out there, and we knew that we had all of this on tape, and then we knew that we kept all of our tapes for 7 years, and so we knew that if anybody ever actually needed this data, we could get it back. And so they hired my friend to programmatically work their way through the home directory and then delete any directories that were not from a valid user.
Okay. And
so the directories were named after the user, and so you would see the C Preston directory, and then she would look, and she would just traverse the tree, and she would find the directory name, and then she would look to see if there was a user by that name in the password file. And then if the user wasn't there, she would delete it. Mm-hmm. And but she made one small calculation or miscalculation, and that is that there was a 2-level directory structure.
Oh, so no.
It was like home one /A/ Alfred, home one /C/ Preston. And so she worked her way down the tree. She got to home one A. Is there a username A in the tree, in the password file? Nope. All right, delete A.
Oh no!
And she was like a third of the way through the directories when people started. They were unable to log in because they had no home directory, and we got a whole bunch of calls to the thing. And luckily, she stopped it out. And I still remember she called me that day, and her first words were, she's like, Curtis, how were the backups of HP FS01 last night? And I'm like, they were fine. Why are you asking? And we proceeded to restore all the home directories.
That's a scary thing, because imagine if you didn't have those backups.
Yeah.
Right. That's a third of the company's data gone, or users on that server.
Yeah.
And your data too, because you're in the seas. And your data too, because you're in the seas.
That's right. Yes, I was gone. You probably would have been safe, with the being in the P's there. There's another great sort of. Do you have a story?
I want you to tell another story.
Okay. So there's another great story. It actually involves the deletion of backup data, but it drives home this issue of basically users or admins make mistakes. And this has to do with your former employer, Legato. And they introduced a feature, two features actually, in it seemed like it was version 5 maybe. And one of the problems was when you expired tapes and you were going to reuse those tapes, you would relabel those tapes. And by that, I mean, you would put an electronic label on the front of the tape. And by doing that, you effectively erase the rest of the tape, because it puts an end of data marker at the end of the label.
Yeah.
And then you can't get past that with a tape drive. And so but the problem was, even if you had like several tape drives, the process, it would label the tapes one at a time. So if you had a whole bunch of tapes, it took a long time. And then also when you would label it, it would confirm the deletion each time.
Okay.
Are you sure you want to relabel this tape? And so they introduced the fast and silent option, where they would use every available tape drive in the library, and they would not ask. Okay. So if you check those two boxes, then basically you would relabel whatever tapes you selected. But this was accompanied by a bug. And the bug was that if you had a list of tapes in a tape library, and you double clicked on one of those tapes, you would expect that what would pop up would be a dialog that would include just that tape that you just clicked on. That's not how it worked. Yeah. If you clicked on the tape, what would pull up was slot 1 to slot however many slots there were.
Oh no.
Right? So if you wanted to relabel just this one tape, you would double click it. And if you weren't paying attention, it would pop up a dialog box. And if you click yes, fast and silent, go, what you just told it to do was relabel every tape in the tape library.
Oh no.
And I was there when it was actually a Legato employee that was at it was a healthcare company up in the LA area, and he managed to relabel this customer's tapes, all of them. Again, I think he got like halfway through the tape library before he realized what he had done.
And there's no going back, right?
Because once you put the electronic label on the front, it puts an end of data marker after that, and you can't get past that. I hope the customer had copies of those tapes, but the customer was not very happy.
Oh, I would not be either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we've been talking about this for a while, but there is a third story or fourth story I want you to tell.
Oh, you have another story?
Yes.
All right.
I want you to tell the story about temp and source code.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. So, so for those that don't live in the Unix world, temp, slash TMP or slash TEMP, depending on which OS you were talking about, which distribution, was typically where you just put garbage files, right? It's temp, it's temporary, right? And and you just use it for garbage files, right? For scripting and stuff like that. And and then on some of the distributions, and specifically on HPUX, which is what we were running, temp was actually in RAM. And so when you rebooted the box, anything in temp would go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Right? It's temp. That's the point of temp. And we one day I got a restore request for a directory structure in temp. And I said, what is this? And they go, oh, well, it's a source code tree that we've been working on, this group of consultants, like 20 of us or something. We've been working on it for a few months, and it was in temp, and the box, it got rebooted, or it got deleted. They said, like, they didn't know how it got deleted. It got deleted. I'm like, it's in temp. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, we don't back up temp. we never have backed up temp. It's temp, right? It's like backing up your garbage can. Like, what is the point of that, right? And so they're like, well, you don't understand. Like, heads are going to roll if we lose this source code tree. And I'm like, not my head. Like,
yeah. Who was the genius who decided to put it in temp?
Yeah, it was a developer. It was a developer, like a whole team of developers, and nobody was like, is this where we should put this?
So, I know we've been focused on like human error, doing things accidentally.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not necessarily just an end user who could be at fault. It could be an admin. It could just be company processes are broken, right? But it's still like, I think the key here is asking questions before things go wrong, so you know how your data is being backed up and where it's going.
Right. And and a lot of these problems could be fixed by versioning, right? Snapshots and things like that, so we don't have to use the quote unquote backup system. But I do think that this is like the number one reason that we do restores, right?
Do you think it's still the case today?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think right now the number one reason we do restores is humans, right? We probably do more restores having to do with cyber incidents than we do stupid user incidents, but they still happen. They still happen all the time.
Do you think a lot of the user, because you mentioned like the help desk, right? People would call in, they would ask for things. Do you think, though, with a lot of the technologies out there, that users are now doing sort of self-service restores where they don't need to be embarrassed by, hey, I accidentally deleted this file, my resume.doc, can you please bring it back?
Yeah, I think a couple of things there. One is there's a lot of shadow IT going on where people are doing their own backups or something like backups, and so they use that instead of having to call a help desk. And then the other is, I do think that there are a lot of technologies that have been deployed in data centers, snapshots being the primary one, that have allowed users to essentially do their own restores, right? They know I can go to Tilde snapshot and I can go in there and I can get whatever I want from whatever time frame I want. And I can get it from an hour ago, right? Just before I did the stupid thing. So I do think that there's probably less of a reason for people to call into an actual help desk or to go to a website and say, hey, I need this file restored.
Or the trash box.
Self-service. What's that?
Or the trash bin, right? Most tools these days have a trash bin where you can go grab your data.
Well, the trash bin is usually only helpful if you delete files.
Yeah.
If you corrupt the files, trash bins aren't usually helpful.
Yeah.
And this this is one of the things that I used to hear about Salesforce. I go, well, Salesforce has a trash bin. And I'm like, right. But when you modify files, when you modify what they would call,
Objects.
we'll call it records. Actually, an object, they use the term object in my opinion, very weirdly. To them, an object is like the user table.
Oh, that's right.
That's an object. I never understood that, but whatever. I would call it a record, right? When you modify a record, there is no place where the previous version of that record is stored. Yeah. And so, and I remember one time where I screwed up we had a Salesforce database that had a couple million records. And I screwed up every million of them by accidentally, first off, it should be a federal crime that when you have an Excel spreadsheet and you click on a column and then you say sort
one column and not everything.
That should be whoever came up with that feature needs to be tarred and feathered. How is that? In what world is that what anyone wants to do? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think now when you do it, it'll say, "Did you mean to sort?" And you just have to push.
Yeah.
No, I want to sort the whole thing. But like, why would that ever be the case? You know what I mean? It should be like what they did in AWS with open buckets, where you have to like really, really, really try really hard to do an open bucket. It should be like that. And if you actually want to do a sort by just that column, you should have to really say so.
It's like provide a blood oath and.
Yeah. Because once you do that, and so what I did was I accidentally sorted I downloaded the phone number column, which was all phone numbers are formatted like all different, and so I figured out I wrote a program to basically take out all of the formatting and then put back the formatting the way I wanted it, right? Except I sorted it.
Oh, Curtis.
And so when I uploaded that back to Salesforce using the data loader, I think that's what that was called. It's been a while. I just put all the wrong phone numbers to all the wrong places. But luckily, I had downloaded my user table prior to doing that. Luckily, I had it back up there.
So do you want to even touch on the second category? Because I think that's basically what we talk about on the podcast, like 97.2% of the time.
Oh, the cybersecurity stuff. Yeah. Just a little bit. I do want to specifically talk about the insider threat, because I don't think we talk about that as much, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that you need to design your backup systems to be resilient against the insider threat, and I don't think that people think about that enough.
What's the insider threat?
Well, it's someone who it's a person who works on the inside. They are one of your employees or contractors who have full access to whatever system we're talking about. And either they have been compromised or their user ID has been compromised, right? So typically what we're referring to them being compromised, right? They're
a bad actor inside the company.
They're a bad actor inside the company. The most famous or infamous one. So this is a story from 2002, and the story that I'm looking at is actually a very ugly thing here on justice.gov, and it talks about basically I'll just read the opening sentence here. A disgruntled computer systems administrator for UBS was charged today with using a logic bomb to cause more than $3 million in damage to the company's computer network and with securities fraud for his failed plan to drive the company's stock down with the activation of the logic bomb.
The other story?
Yeah.
Do you remember doing the one about Unify where they claimed that they were being hacked and it was an insider?
Oh, right.
This was like 2 years ago?
Yeah. So, if you have somebody that's on the inside, they can do a lot of damage to your systems without you before you're able to stop them.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and I will also say with great power comes great restriction, because the more powerful a person's role is, the more controls should be placed around that power, right? And you should, everything that you do should be logged, and and the more destructive things you should be able to have to get multi-person authentication, otherwise known as Four Eyes authentication. Because this is just you have to think about that, because not only are you protecting from the insider threat, you're protecting from a bad actor getting access. There's been a lot of stories, right, with that. There was, of course, the LastPass incident, which is, was the nail in the coffin for me regarding LastPass, where basically the hacker was able to gain access to a backup of the vault, because they weren't able to decrypt the vault, but they were able to get access to the vault because there was this backup script that had hard coded credentials in it. And then once they gained, there was an initial breach, and then that breach gave them access to see this script, which then gave them access to the credentials, which gave them access to the backup, which gave them access to the vault.
Which was, I think, then used for targeted crypto attacks.
It absolutely was used for targeted crypto attacks against people. Yeah.
Yep.
And so really all we're just talking about, just realize that human error is still one of the biggest reasons that we do anything in the backup world. And when we talk about this, just try to implement the concept of least privilege, try to implement the concept of minimizing the blast radius, minimizing the ability for somebody to do something, or the more dangerous something is, the more controls you can put around it, or should put around it.
So going to a sentence you just said, humans are always at risk.
Humans,
right?
Yeah.
So
humans are always de-risk, I would say. Yeah.
So what if people are like, hey, forget about humans, let's switch over to AI? No. I want to play a thought experiment. Right? What would your views change? What you would recommend? Because for humans, right, we talk about putting controls, doing multi-factor authentication, multi-person authentication, right? All of these things. If people start to move towards AI, how does this change? I know this episode is talking about human error. Right, but just to leave the listeners,
I don't think I'm ready to answer that question. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. How's that?
Okay.
I'll just say this. In general, I'm a fan of automation, and AI can enable automation, but it's got to be put into
with the proper controls and everything else in place.
Yeah.
So again, controls may be different, but
great power comes great, responsibility, right? And so you want to sorry, I just found myself thinking about
Spider-Man.
Stan Lee. I wonder if Stan Lee thinks about the fact that his Spider-Man line would be quoted at a IT podcast decades later. So the more power the AI has, the more control you got to put around it, because it could do things, right? It could be used to do things. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fun, sad, depressing, etc. But that's why we back up.
Yeah. And that's why we're human.
Yes. And I want to wish you have an upcoming trip.
I do.
Yeah. I want to wish you a good trip.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I hope our listeners get to have a trip coming up. Yes. Maybe you have some fun. So at least somebody will have some fun. And with that is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.